couple important details. Elon Musk, of course, owns both of these companies, right? So this is really, taking one side of his universe and sort of formally merging it with another side of his universe. But yes, this, deal was all stock, valued X at $33 billion, less debt, and supposedly valued xAI at $80 billion. And so there will now be this new sort of joint entity between the two that we can obviously talk about. But I think, on the one hand, what took so long? On the other hand, what is happening here? Is this really necessary? And I'm not sure if it really was based on how they were already working together.
Right. That was actually my next question. You log into x.com, you can actually see AI, abilities via x.ai within the app. They work closely together. What's the whole purpose of an acquisition such as this?
Yeah. So let's pretend these were two completely, separate entities. They were owned by different people, right? I think there would be it would make a lot of sense for an AI startup like xAI to acquire X. They now have access to this, proprietary data set, all of these posts and these user accounts that are tweeting every single day. They can use to train their models. No one else now gets access to that. That's a great advantage, or at least a unique characteristic. On the other hand, X is now distributing the xAI chatbot, which is Grok, right? And it's getting it out to millions of people who might otherwise not see it. Those kind of synergies, to use the cliche, make a lot of sense. The problem is those things were already happening, and they were happening because Elon owns both of these companies. And there wasn't really, as far as I can tell, any risk that xAI would suddenly start distributing Grok somewhere else, or that X would suddenly take all of its user data and, start licensing it to OpenAI, right? Elon would not do that. So the fact that they sort of had these two businesses that make a lot of sense together, they were already doing all of those things before a deal, which is why I'm not entirely sure why you needed to spend, $33 billion to make this formal.
I'm so glad you said that amount, right? What was it? $33 billion to do this deal,
33,
right?
yeah.
Boy, that number seems so familiar, Kurt. Can you remind me what he paid for Twitter? It was Twitter at that point. What he paid for it originally?
It was Twitter at that point.
Yeah.
That's right. So the Twitter deal was $44 billion, but that included $12 billion of debt. This is $33 billion with about $12 billion of debt, so 45 total. So he's basically buying Twitter, or now X, again for roughly the same price he paid for it 2.5 years ago. I think a lot of people could make an argument it's probably not valued at the same amount that it probably was 2 years ago when he bought it. But that's the beauty of owning this company and being the majority shareholder. You can kind of assign whatever value you want if you're the one buying it with your other company, which is, I think, what happened here.
So is this going to make X more attractive to advertisers, right? That's been how they make money, right? Or they hope to make money. And a lot of advertisers ran kind of after Elon bought it and things started happening. I mean, does this change the future of X?
It's hard to say that, 72 hours after this was announced. But again,
Yeah.
I'm struggling to see a real dramatic difference to X right here, because again, they were already getting all the benefits of partnering with xAI, right? They were using xAI, they were incorporating Grok and the chatbot into the product. They were using that as sort of a carrot to get people to even subscribe and pay a monthly subscription fee. So I suppose you could say, well, now they're going to be even closer to, these AI tools. Maybe they'll have more efficient algorithms. Maybe their ad targeting will be more efficient because they'll be plugging into this AI machine. But again, I don't see what would have stopped X from doing those things to begin with, right? They clearly were working very closely, same owner, same goals as a result. And so I'm not sure the trajectory for X changes all that dramatically, in my opinion, from where they were a week ago.
What does it mean for existing investors in X, people who owned X equity? What do they have now?
Well, I think this is a huge win if you're an X investor, right? Because you go from having, millions or $1 billion of stock in this kind of struggling social networking company, and now have millions or $1 billion of stock in an AI startup that everyone's very excited about, right? So you're kind of swapping in the old thing for the new thing. And if you're an X investor, I think, you've probably been sitting around for the last 2 years going, am I ever going to get my money back? Am I going to get pennies on the dollar for this investment someday? And now suddenly you've not only been made whole, whole, but your money is kind of riding a much more attractive horse, if that makes sense. And so I think X investors got to be thrilled. xAI investors, on the other hand, may be less enthused, right? Suddenly they're spending 33 billion or 45 billion, whatever number you want to say, to acquire a struggling social networking company when you already had the benefit of getting all that data anyway, through the partnership that they had. So X investors thrilled,
Yeah.
xAI investors, I imagine, are maybe not quite as happy.